Alright everyone, so today I wanted to go over 7 of the most universal epics in the game and what makes them so universal. So what I mean by that as well is these are champions that are going to be useful across multiple types of content and multiple different team formations. It's not like they're only really good in one type of content and then they're not really that great in another. So absolutely going to be some very worthwhile champions to consider taking to 6-star and level 60. And let's start off here with number 1, and this champion is probably going to be regarded as the most universal champion in Raid Shadow Legends for the longest time, at least under the epic category anyway, and that is going to be a champion under the High Elves here, and of course none other than Tyrell. Tyrell has just been known as one of the best champions in the game for the longest time, and now there's a lot of other champions that can do somewhat similar things to him, but he's still absolutely one of the most universal champions in the game. And the reason why he is so universal is because of his combination of the decreased attack that he actually has on his skill 1, so no cooldown on that, and he also has a decreased defense on his second ability here, which is also an AoE. He's got some added utility as well here. As you can see, if the target is under a decreased attack debuff, it will place a sleep debuff for 1 turn. Damage is inflicted proportional to defense, so you've got that sleep in there as well. And then you've got his third ability right here: attacks 1 enemy, decreases the target's turn meter by 50%. If the attack fully depletes the turn meter, it will place a stun debuff for 2 turns. Damage inflicted is proportional to defense. So on top of that additional utility, he is of course also a defense-based champion, which means he's not going to die really easily. He's going to scale his damage based off of his defenses as well, and just that overall combination of having 2 extremely valuable, the strong version as well, which is the 50% of the decreased attack and the decreased defense, that added utility, being a defense-based champion, I mean, you can pretty much take this guy anywhere. He's going to be a worthwhile spot in your team formation across multiple types of content in the game. So very useful, in addition to having this increases ally defense and all battles aura as well. Just a phenomenal epic champion. So Tyrell is going to be number 1 there. Now moving on to number 2, and now we're going to talk about some damage dealers, but these aren't necessarily damage dealers that are only good in one type of content. You can actually use these champions across multiple areas of the game. And let's head over to the Night Revenant here and talk about Skullcrown. So Skullcrown is definitely going to be a universal damage dealing champion. She's got phenomenal skills here, having an area of effect on her skill 1, which already is huge for things like the campaign, but she also places an extra hit if the target has more than 50% HP as well. Then her second ability, which does have a cooldown, is also an AoE, but on top of that, it places the strong version of Weaken as well. Very valuable debuff to have, the fact that it's the strong version and it's also an AoE, with the fact that her entire damage dealing skill kit is all AoE. I mean, you can really just do a lot in terms of damage with Skullcrown, and that's not even getting into the rest of her skill kit here, which is her passive places an unkillable buff on this champion for 1 turn every time their HP drops below 20%. So you've got some additional survivability right there. And then, of course, if she has Senesh on the same team as her, then she's going to revive with 30% HP as well. And you can get this down to a 6-turn cooldown. That, as well as having the 23% speed aura in the arena, which is really, really nice. Even outside of the arena, though, if you take away this aura, she's still a phenomenal damage-dealing champion. You can bring her into dungeons. You can turn her into a campaign farmer. She's obviously phenomenal in the arena. In terms of, being universal for a damage dealer, Skullcrown definitely has to be up there at the top of the list. So that's going to be champion number 2 right there. Now, speaking of universal damage dealers, let's talk about the other universal AoE damage dealer, who's actually a part of Skullcrown's skill kit there, and that's going to be Senesh. So the reason why I also wanted to include Senesh in this list is Skullcrown is a void, so she can be a bit more tricky in order to get, but Senesh is kind of like the non-void counterpart to her, in the sense that she also has an AoE on her skill 1. She's a bit more survivability based, I guess you could say, in terms of her other skill, but she is going to be, in a sense, easier to get because she doesn't come from void shards. You can get her from ancients and sacreds, but she also is going to be universal in the sense that you can use her in multiple areas of the game. She's not just exclusive exclusively best towards one thing. So attacks all enemies, places an extra hit on enemies with less than 50% HP. I actually like this version here as well, because this is going to be great for like the campaign where you might not necessarily get quite enough damage and attack in order to get her to one-shot everything, but you know you're going to have stuff that's going to be below 50% HP. So now you can actually use this to kind of finish things off without having to worry about getting, you know, that exact amount of DPS that you need to 100% one-shot things all the time. So very nice, you know, secondary component to her skill 1 right there. Also an AoE on the skill 1. Then she's got her second ability here, attacks one enemy, puts the target skills on cooldown. That is super useful in certain situations. Heals the ally with the lowest HP by 25%, and that's really useful. This is why I said Senesh is the counterpart, but she is a bit more survivability and heal focused. And then, of course, you've got her quite well-known third ability here, Immortality. She can get down to a 5-turn cooldown, equalizes the HP of all allies. The HP levels of all allies will be brought up to the level of the ally with the highest HP, then heals the target ally by 10% of their max HP. So extremely useful skill. You just kind of have to, you know, form around it a little bit and make sure that your team can kind of get the most usefulness out of the skill as possible. So you might have to do like a little bit of experimentation if you do use Senesh to kind of work around the skill a little bit, but nonetheless, her first ability here, the damage, the combination of her support and heals, absolutely makes her a very universal champion. So that's going to be number 3 on the list. Now we're going to move on to number 4 here, and we are going to stay in the Night Revenant actually, and we are going to go to Miscreated Monster. Now, Miscreated Monster is just an absolute beast in every single way possible. Now, I think some people would say technically he's probably best in certain areas of the game like Spider, but he's just such a good champion. I mean, this guy easily compares to many of the top legendaries in the game. That is how good he is. So even if you don't exclusively use him for Spider, he's still just a complete beast in all other aspects of the game. Will absolutely crush it. This guy, I believe, is even capable of soloing most or all of the Nightmare campaign. I mean, that's how strong he is. So you've got his skill 1 here, attacks one enemy 2 times. Each hit has a 15% chance of placing a stun debuff for 1 turn. Has a 50% chance of placing a decreased defense debuff for 1 turn if the stun is placed. So not only do you have that stun potential there, but you've got some added debuff there with the decreased defense. Then he's got his second ability here, attacks all enemies, has a 50% chance of placing a stun debuff for 1 turn, on an AoE by the way, and places a shield buff on all allies for 3 turns equal to 25% of the damage inflicted. And this guy is an HP-based champion. This is based off of HP. So if you build this guy extremely tanky, you're going to see some absolute insane damage from this ability right here. You know, this is why he is super good for Spider, but even in dungeons where you're also facing, you know, trash waves and multiple enemies at the same time, I mean, the amount of damage and the shield that you're going to see from this ability is absolutely crazy. Then he's got his third ability here. It places a 50% ally protection buff on all allies except this champion for 3 turns. You can get this down to a 5-turn cooldown, by the way. Heals this champion by 50% of their max HP. Places a 15% continuous heal on this champion for 3 turns. I mean, this guy's got it all. He's got this ridiculous HP, this AoE here. He's got the ally protection, so now he's incredibly tanky, and he's going to be tanking a lot of the damage that your other champions are taking, in addition to healing himself for 50% as well as putting a continuous heal. I mean, this guy's skill kit is just completely insane. And then, of course, you've got his passive, places a fear debuff on the attacker for 1 turn whenever an ally is attacked while under ally protection. In addition to, of course, this ally HP in the arena. But, I mean, hey, this guy is just a crusher. He's that good. He could be good anywhere. So next up on the list is going to be, also kind of his counterpart. These champions were both released at the same time, and that is Madame Cerise. And the reason why Madame Cerise is on this list is because her third skill here, her debuff, the removes all buffs from all enemies, places a 50% decreased attack debuff and a 60% decreased defense debuff on all enemies for 3 turns. You can get down to a 4-turn cooldown. This ability is just so good that all dungeons, all aspects of the game, you can easily get an insane benefit from having this debuff right here. So she's just that good, and the fact that she's got so much going on in her actual skill kit, just this ability right here, is going to allow you to free up, potential spots in your team roster to be able to put other champions there, whether they are additional DPS champions or additional support champions, whatever you need. I mean, she just knocks out so many birds with one stone just with this one ability right there. So her other abilities, though, they've got the 20% chance to place a fear for one turn, increases if they've got debuffs. And she's got this AoE as well, so she can actually do a decent amount of damage, although that's not really what you're going to build her around. You really want to build her to just survive and place this third ability right here as much as possible. And remember, because it's debuffs, your enemies are going to be taking less turns than you are. So even though it's 3-turn debuff and the cooldown is 4 turns, you are going to take 4 turns before your enemies take 3 turns, because obviously you're going to have that advantage of being able to build speed on your gear and so on and so forth. So it's pretty much always going to have these debuffs active right here. And then, of course, her shield is just going to give her additional survivability. So when you've got her built with HP, she's going to benefit from having this additional 10% shield on her every single turn as well. So phenomenal debuffer that's very universal in many, many aspects of the game. She's just that valuable. Very similar to Miscreated Monster. I think a lot of people would classify her as a legendary quality, even though she's technically not a legendary. And to end things off here, we've got 2 more champions. Next up, we are going to Night Revenants again. There's a lot of really universal champions in the Night Revenants, and the next one is Sepulchre Sentinel. I apologize if I didn't quite pronounce that correctly, but she is another fantastic champion that's got a decreased attack on her skill 1 here, and she's defense-based. So going back to similar to Tyrell, that defense-based means she's not only going to do more damage, but she's also going to increase her survivability. So decrease attack in addition to having increased defense and block debuffs on all allies as well. I mean, these combination, just champions that offer so much in terms of buffs, debuffs, utility. These are champions that are not just going to be good at one aspect of the game. You're going to be able to bring them to multiple dungeons and kind of keep them in your team roster, because in a lot of these high-end dungeons, you're going to need these check marks. You're going to need certain things done, certain buffs and debuffs, and when you have champions that can offer so much like this one, these are champions you're absolutely going to want to have in your team. And then, of course, her passive has a 25% chance, which you can boost up to, I believe, 50%, of completely blocking incoming damage when an ally is attacked. Occurs once per turn. I mean, that alone as well is going to give you some insane additional survivability. Of course, her aura increases ally defense in all battles by 25%. So very strong buff, debuff, utility, universal type champion there. Absolutely going to be worth keeping in your roster for multiple aspects of the game. And to end things off here, we're going to go to the Banner Lords, one of my favorite champions, honestly. This guy easily deserves videos on his own because he is that awesome, and that is Stag Night. So kind of similar to Sepulchre Sentinel and Tyrell, you've got that theme of having just so much that he offers to the table, where he's going to be able to fill that role of multiple champions, so you might be able to free up spots and kind of include other champions that you normally would not be able to by having this guy on your team. So his first ability here attacks one enemy 2 times. Each hit has a 30% chance of placing a 30% decreased speed debuff for 2 turns on his auto attack, by the way, so no cooldown on this, so you should have no problem keeping this up on bosses and whatnot. You can see here you can increase that buff debuff chance by 20% just from the skill books as well. And then he's got his AoE here. Attacks all enemies, has a 70% chance, which you can boost with skill books and the mastery up to 100%. Of placing a 60% decreased defense debuff and a 50% decreased attack debuff for 2 turns. You can get that down to a 3-turn cooldown as well. I mean, this ability, you've got the decreased defense, you've got the decreased attack, and you've also got decreased speed on the auto attack. That is just so much that this guy is offering. It's absolutely crazy. Even if you ignore any potential damage that this guy does, I mean, he's just got so much utility. Pretty crazy. And on top of that, also his passive places a 50% increased accuracy buff on all allies for 1 turn each time the ally has a debuff resisted by an enemy. So just some additional utility there to boot. So phenomenal champion. Absolutely love this guy. Easily deserves more focus on just how powerful he is on his own. But anyway, that is a list of 7 of the most universal champions in the game, as well as just some reasons on why they can be used in multiple different teams and formations in the game. So I hope that you guys enjoyed this video, and if you guys did, consider subscribing to the channel. Feel free to leave a quick like as well. It means more than you can imagine, so thank you so much to all of you guys who do that. And more Raid Shadow Legends videos, guides, tutorials, all that fun stuff should be popping up on the screen right about now. Feel free to check them out. If not, until next time, take care everyone. This is Salt of the Salty Guild, signing out.